Everybody knows the good doctor, but I want to give you as a prompt to remind you, he's got the Lord has used him in so many remarkable ways in so many arenas. You know, he recently served as the 17th Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I had the privilege at the Family Research Council of working with him on a number of policy issues. He was willing to go head to head with the left on some of their radical policies that endangered women and children who were seeking refuge in women's shelters because they wanted, through the transgender ideology, to allow men to come in there. And Dr. Carson had the audacity to say that only women should go in women's shelters. For nearly 30 years, he served as the director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Children's Center. That's a position that he assumed at the age of 33 years old, becoming the youngest major division director in the hospital's history. In 1987, he successfully performed the first separation of twins that were conjoined at the back of the head. He is known worldwide for his skill and talent given to him by the Lord, which he will readily admit. And today he is the founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute, which is a new, I hesitate to say think tank because it's a think-do tank. And I think, okay. We have too many think tanks. We need do tanks. We need people that do things. And so I'm grateful. You know, Dr. Carson could have easily retired after he came out of the administration. He's had such a successful career. But he is in the arena, battling for the hearts and minds of children and for our country. The new foundation, American Cornerstone, which he is the chairman, the founder of, is really designed to promote the 4 founding principles and cornerstones of our country: faith, liberty, community, and life. And so I'm so honored that Dr. Carson is here with us today. We're just going to have a little bit of a discussion on the things that we may have read about in the newspaper, things that you and I care deeply about. I'll just start with this, Dr. Carson, because you and I, last time we were together, actually having a conversation like this was on June 24th when we got the news that the Supreme Court had overturned the Roe decision.
Yes.
A lot has happened.
It has been amazing what has happened. And I think it's very important that people be conversant about this subject and not just go stand in the corner with your head down and hope no one calls you a name. You know, we're given a mission to protect those who can't protect themselves. In fact, what does it say in the Bible? In Proverbs 24, 11 and 12, it says, "If thou forbear to deliver them that are drawn unto death, and those that are ready to be slain, if thou sayest, Behold, we knew it not, doth not he that pondereth the heart consider it? And he that keepeth thy soul, doth not he know it? And shall he not render to every man according to his works?" That's pretty clear. You know, we're not supposed to just sit there and let these babies be slaughtered. And what was done on June the 24th was just correcting a grave ill. Major decisions about life and death should be in the hands of the people and their elected representatives, not in the hands of unelected judges. And it was just returned to the situation that should have existed in the first place. But, you know, when you stop and you think about life, what a miracle life is. I mean, a male gamete with 23 chromosomes, a female gamete with 23 chromosomes, neither of which would go on to become a person. But when they join together, conception has occurred. Now you've got 46 chromosomes, a complete genetic roadmap for an individual, and that will go on to become a functional human being. That's when life begins. And I suspect that years from now, people will look back at this time in our history and they'll say, how could those people do that? How could they reach into a woman's uterus with a forceps and just grab something and twist and pull until an arm comes out, or a shoulder, or a liver? How could they do that? How could people who take the Hippocratic Oath do something like that and not be bothered by it? It really boggles the mind when you stop and think about it. But, you know, the first step, obviously, is to recognize that we are dealing with something that's sacred, human life, something that God knew in the womb, even before that conception occurred. And we don't have the ability to create life, and it's not our responsibility to destroy life. So, you know, I'm delighted that it has occurred, and I think we need to be very careful the way we shepherd it through, though. I mean, we have to be wise, but courageous. And I think it's so important that we understand that so many of these young women end up in a difficult situation, and they don't know which way to go. And some of them make a mistake that they regret for the rest of their lives. Those people need help too. But we also need to make it much easier to adopt babies, and much less expensive, much less red tape, so that can be done appropriately.
You know, Dr. Carson, you talked about how this decision on the sanctity of life, the policy regarding abortion, comes back to the states and to the elected representatives. But that really kind of speaks to the Cornerstone Institute and the focus on those 4 issues of faith, liberty, community, and life, because we have to have guidance.
Yes.
And so talk a little bit about why you have begun this initiative.
Well, as you mentioned before, I seriously thought about retiring. I said, I failed retirement the first time. I said, I'm going to get it right this time. But, you know, looking at the direction of the country, it was impossible. So some very outstanding people from HUD joined me in creating American Cornerstone Institute. You know, it was interesting because thinking about what name should we have, and we thought Cornerstone sounds really good. And my wife was at home at our farm looking through some boxes and going through them year by year, and there was a box from 1993. And she said, I just throw this stuff out, but I'll look through it since sometimes I find something. And she was looking through it, and she saw this beautiful calligraphy and pulled it out, and it was a calendar. And on the back of it was a picture depicting the laying of the cornerstone of the capital of the United States, exactly 200 years before that, in 1793. And then she looked a little closer at it, and the day of the laying of the cornerstone was September 18, my birthday. So she said, yep, that's the right name. But, you know, looking at those cornerstone principles that were so important to the foundation of this country, faith. I mean, the Judeo-Christian values that inspired our Constitution and our whole being is such an important part of us. Even today, all these years later, all of our money still says, in God we trust. Now, there are those who are trying to get it removed, but it tells you so much about who we were and who we can indeed be again. And then the liberty. The United States of America is the beacon of liberty. It is the place where people from around the world who are oppressed look to go. And if we were this horrible, horrible systemically racist place, why would people be forming caravans trying to get in here? And think about that. And when they got here, wouldn't they call all their friends and relatives and say, don't come here, it's a horrible place? You know, that's obviously not what's happening.
No.
And, you know, one of the things that the left does is they say, don't believe your eyes or your ears, just listen to us. We'll tell you what to think. We'll tell you what to say. I mean, can you believe the vice president on last weekend said there's no problem at the border. The border is secure. And thousands of people are coming, oh, don't mind the man behind the curtain, you know? Just incredible, incredible. And then the concept of community, which is so important to our society. People from different backgrounds with different skills, different talents, able to work together for the good of the whole. This is what allowed this country to flourish and to grow, to go from a bunch of ragtag militiamen to the pinnacle of the world in record time. And now we see people trying to destroy that sense of community. They're trying to get the American people to believe that we are each other's enemies. Just because that person who's lived across the street from you for 20 years peacefully has a different yard sign, you're supposed to hate them. You're supposed to want to cancel them. You know, we, the American people, cannot fall for this garbage. We're not each other's enemies, and we need to understand. You know, the symbol of our country, the bald eagle, has a right wing and a left wing. Can't fly with two right wings, it can't fly with two left wings. But with a left and a right wing, it can soar majestically. And that's what we the people have to make that clear. Because the politicians, I don't know about them. You know, when I was running for president, all over this country, I found people in the smallest little hamlets in Alabama or North Dakota, they had common sense. Not so much in Washington, D.C. So if this country is to be saved, and I think it is to be saved. You know, Benjamin Franklin, when he came out of Constitution Hall in 1787, after a laborious task, and it looked like they weren't going to be able to finish it, there was so much rancor. And Benjamin Franklin said, gentlemen, stop. Let's get down on our knees and seek wisdom from the Lord. And they prayed and they got up and they resolved their issues. But when he came out of that hall, a woman said to him, sir, what do we have here? A monarchy or a republic? He said, a republic, if we can keep it. We've kept it for almost 250 years. It is at the most tenuous spot right now that it has ever been in. We have forces that want to fundamentally change our nation. And the only thing that is going to save our nation is we the people. The government will not save our nation because governments do what governments do. They grow, they infiltrate, and they dominate, which is the reason that our founders worked so hard to give us a constitution that would control the government. But we the people have to be the ones that drive it. And one of the ways that we can do that is voting appropriately. And I hope everybody here will take the pledge to make sure you register, make sure you vote. We actually have a graphic that's going to come up on that screen momentarily with a QR code. You can take a picture of it. It'll tell you where to go, how to get registered. But it's very important to use some of the facilities, for instance, that Tony Perkins and his group, you know, they have gone through great lengths to sort of vet some of these people. You need to know who you're voting for. A lot of people, they go into the voting booth and they just look for the name that looks familiar. Yeah. It could be Satan. They say, yep, I know that one, yep. In many cases it is. And, that's why we get what we've gotten. And we should be just as diligent as we want our kids to be when they're doing their term papers or their work. We want them to know what they're talking about. We want them to study, to be conversant. We need to do that too. It is absolutely vital, because if we keep putting people in who believe in this far left ideology and who want to change our country and who do not believe in God and who do not believe that our rights come from God, they think our rights come from government, who do not think that we're people-centric, they think that we're government-centric, that the government can save us. And they're part of the useful tools that Khrushchev was talking about when he told Eisenhower 60 years ago that your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we will never have to fire one shot, because he knew that all you had to do was gain control of this educational system so you could indoctrinate the kids, gain control of the media so you could spoon feed the people only what you wanted them to hear, replace faith in God with faith in government, raise the national debt to astronomical levels so you could justify massive taxation, redistribution of wealth, and complete dependence on the government. Does any of that sound familiar? That's all the stuff that's going on, and we're the only ones who can stop it. And then the last cornerstone, life. From the womb to the tomb, we need to respect life. And as we've grown further away from respecting life, look what has happened to us. And, how can we even think about destroying innocent, beautiful little babies? But also, we have to be concerned about what's going on in our societies, the people who are addicted to drugs out there on the streets. We need to be concerned about them too, the quality of their lives. I guarantee you the vast majority of those people, if they could push a button and they would no longer be addicted, they would wear that button out. It is not easy when you get hooked in these things. And we need to be concerned about the alcoholics and the mentally ill. There was a time when we took care of the mentally ill. We had hospitals and places for them, particularly the criminally insane. Now we put those people out on the street, and they're not prepared to be out on the street by themselves, and often don't know what they're doing. And innocent law-abiding citizens have to suffer the consequences. That's not really compassion. That's not being compassionate to that individual who is affected or to the victims of that individual. And we have got to start caring about all of our citizens. And what about all these young people, particularly young women and girls, who are being sold into sexual slavery? I mean, there are more slaves in the world today when you look at human trafficking than there have ever been in the history of the world. We don't have to go back 200 years and dredge up something that happened in this country. There is horrible stuff going on today. We need to focus our attention on that. We certainly need to learn from everything that has happened in the past, and we need to manifest the love of God. That is who we are. That is America.
Dr. Carson, you often say it's time to heal our nation. When you look at the divide that you talked about in our nation, what do you think, what is our role as followers of Christ? Because oftentimes, we're people of faith that have conviction and we believe in transcendent truth, meaning that we know there's right and there's wrong, we become the target of a lot of that hostility. So how should we be operating today?
Well, there's no question that we're different. And Jesus said, you follow me, you're going to be persecuted. Doesn't mean you need to go out and look for persecution.
Right.
There are ways to talk to people without being judgmental, but just by asking questions frequently. Why do you believe such and so. Just kind of explain that to me, please. And a lot of times, if you ask somebody to explain, they and you will quickly find out that they don't really know what they're talking about. That can have a profound effect on people, much more of an effect than if you go pointing your finger in their face and saying, you are wrong, and that it just doesn't have an effect, because then they withdraw into their corner and become defensive, and they're not going to really want to hear what you have to say. And conversation, communication, that is really the key. And you'll notice, you know, when two young people are attracted to each other, and, you know, now they're fiancés, and they just can't stand to be away from each other. And even if they are away from each other, they're on the telephone, you know, they just are communicating all the time. And then fast forward, they're ready to get divorced. Don't talk to each other. Don't have a word to say to each other. And their spouse becomes the devil incarnate. You got to keep the lines of communication open. That is so vital. And what we're doing in our society, we're allowing politicians to polarize us so that we get into our respective corners and hurl hand grenades at each other rather than engaging in conversation, because you can take the most radical left-wing person and the most radical right-wing person, and they're going to agree on 90% of stuff. But we let those purveyors of hatred and division take that 10% and play it up to a point where we hate each other, and we have to stop doing that.
Don't you see the media playing a key role in that? Because, you know, when I first came to Washington 20 years ago, there used to be shows like Hardball, right, where there would at least be a debate between conservatives and liberals. Now, you just have a conservative or a quasi-conservative channel over here, and you have the liberal channels over here, and they just rant. There is no conversation.
No, that's exactly right. The media, unfortunately, has lost its vision. The press is the only business entity protected by our Constitution. And that is because they were supposed to disseminate unbiased information to the people so that the country could be run on the will of the people. Now, of course, the Europeans thought this was crazy. You know, you can't run a country on the will of the people. You have to have a monarch. You have to have a ruling body. But the press was going to give the people the information so that they would be well informed, because our founders said our Constitution is based upon a well-informed and educated populace. But when the press decides to put their thumb on the scale, it distorts the whole system as it was designed. So they have played a massive role in the dysfunction of our society. And every time I see a young journalist, I talk to them about that. And I said, maybe you can be on the front wave of a new group of journalists who are fair and objective.
Dr. Carson, before our time wraps up, I want you to share just a little bit with our guest about the Little Patriots platform, which is a part of the Cornerstones. This is a resource that's free. It's online for parents and grandparents, a great resource in countering the indoctrination that's taking place with our children.
Yes, it's so important. You know, as part of American Cornerstone Institute, we said we have to have a pediatric component, because I was a pediatric neurosurgeon. And, you know, the kids are so important. They are our future. And they have been working on indoctrinating our kids, not just for the last few years. This has been going on for decades. And you saw some of the manifestations of it a couple of summers ago with all the rioting with Antifa and Black Lives Matter. These are so many young people who have been indoctrinated to believe that we live in an evil nation that has created untold problems for the rest of the world. So, you know, to counter this, we said, let's create an online learning program that's beautifully done, well-researched, is very entertaining for our young people. So we have a program K through 5, which teaches the true history of our country, warts and all, you know, good, bad, and ugly. But if you are objective and you look at our country, there's a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. See, the left will have you believe that it's mostly bad and ugly, and they want to build our future on the bad and ugly. We build our future on the good, and it makes a huge difference. We've recently added a component to the program called Star Spangled Adventures, and we've hired some of the very best animators from Disney, Pixar, ABC Kids, ones that are non-woke, by the way. And they have created these beautiful cartoon adventures. We just had one come out on the Boston Tea Party. And when you look at these, not only are you entertained, but you really understand what was behind these things. And they all come with lessons that can be used with them. They can be used by parents and grandparents who will learn a lot of history themselves. They can be used in private schools, charter schools, home schools, you know, any environment, it works very well. And we also have books. We have our latest book, Red, White, and Blue, Our Flag Matters to Me and You. And a little boy finds a torn and tattered flag, and Liberty Eagle, who is the moderator for all these programs, explains to him what the red, the white, and the blue is, what the stars mean, what the stripes mean, about the freedom that it represents, the people who have sacrificed to give us that freedom. And he wants to pick that flag up and dust it off and make sure it's in a place of honor. He wants to stand when he sees that flag. And we don't do it in a way that denigrates people who want to kneel and who want to denigrate our flag. That's not what it's about. No politics. But we want people to be proud of the nation that we live in. And we have another book, Why America Matters. And all the proceeds from those books go right back into the program. That's one of the reasons that it's absolutely free of charge online, littlepatriotslearning.com. Make sure you get your little ones, your grandchildren, your children involved. And, you know, this is how we fight the left. We have to be every bit as aggressive as they are. And I think, quite frankly, our lessons are a lot more fun.
Dr. Carson, I want to thank you for being here. Please thank Dr. Ben Carson.
Thank you.